At a Cheatham County courtroom, a team of prosecutors laid out a disturbing series of events describing alleged repeated abuse a little boy suffered at the hands of his father's live-in girlfriend.
I've sentenced people to life in prison and other more serious situations in the form of a death penalty case that I've had, and I've never heard a more horrific statement of facts in my entire life.
Yeah, Bob and Haley, the details are brutal, and the judge in this case said he's never seen any crime just like this. The prosecutors in this case described the horrific scene from 79-day video evidence of Shannon Lee Elliott torturing and killing 5-year-old Turner Simpkins, her boyfriend's son. In July of last year, police went to Elliott's home and found 5-year-old Turner not breathing. They say he had extensive bruising, lacerations, and bite marks.
This story may be one of the most disturbing you'll ever hear. A story not just of cruelty, but of betrayal in its purest form. For 79 days, a 5-year-old boy was tortured. Every wound, every cry, every moment of his suffering silently recorded by cameras no one bothered to check. Imagine this. Footage shows a small boy, barely able to stand, sitting silently in a corner of a workplace. His eyes are hollow, his body is broken, and yet the world around him carries on as if he doesn't exist. The cameras watched, his father watched, and no one, not one person, saved him. The judge who presided over this case later said, "I've sentenced people to life and even in death penalty cases, but I have never heard a more horrific set of facts in my entire life." This is the story of Turner Wayne Simpkins, a bright and joyful little boy from Tennessee, who was betrayed not just by the monster who hurt him, but by the father he loved more than anything in the world. Today I'm going to tell you the devastating case of how Turner's final months became a living nightmare, and how a forgotten surveillance system would ultimately reveal a horror no one wanted to believe. Turner Wayne Simpkins was born on June 18, 2018, in Nashville, Tennessee. From the very first second, he became the light of his family's life, a boy whose laughter could brighten a whole room, whose curiosity glimmered in crystal blue eyes, and whose gentle nature made everyone who met him feel instantly at ease. To those who knew him, Turner was simply unforgettable. He adored superheroes, Batman, Sonic, Catboy from PJ Masks, and he often wore their costumes around the house, leaping from couch cushions as if he were saving the world. When he ran, arms outstretched, giggling through the halls of his family's home in Chapmansboro, he wasn't pretending. In his heart, he was a hero. Turner's world revolved around love, especially the bond he shared with his older brother, Maverick. The two were inseparable. They shared toys, adventures, and even a bed. Whenever Turner was scared or upset, it was Maverick he ran to. Their connection was the kind that only siblings who trust each other deeply can understand. His room was filled with color and laughter. Toys of every kind lined the shelves, but he always returned to his favorites. His action figures, his superhero masks, and the stuffed animals he carried to bed. Outside, his father had installed swings just for the boys. Turner would spend hours out there, singing Mickey Mouse songs, pretending to fly, his legs pumping against the wind. But more than anyone else, Turner adored his dad. To Turner, Austin Simpkins wasn't just a father. He was a best friend, a hero, a protector. They would go swimming together, ride boats, play in the backyard. There are photos of Turner on his father's shoulders, both of them laughing, splashing in pools, or playing with the family dog. Turner's face in those photos glows with a trust so pure, so unconditional, it's almost painful to look at now. And then there was Sierra, Turner's mother. Although she and Austin had separated, Sierra remained an active part of Turner's life. He loved his weekends with her, carefree days filled with cuddles, cartoons, and warm baths. He would come home from those visits full of stories, full of smiles. In those moments, everything still felt okay. Turner was kind, polite. He always said, please and thank you. He was the kind of child who would hug you for no reason, just because he felt like it. He had a gentle soul, the kind that made people stop and pay attention, not because he demanded it, but because his spirit was so quietly beautiful. No one could have imagined that such a bright, sweet, loving little boy would become the target of something so monstrous. For most of his short life, Turner Simpkins lived in a warm, bustling household. Though his parents, Austin Simpkins and Sierra Ford, were no longer together, they had worked out a way to co-parent that kept Turner surrounded by love. Sierra remained a nurturing and present mother, while Turner lived primarily with his father in Chapmansboro, Tennessee, alongside his big brother, Maverick. From the outside, their home on Poplar Ridge Road seemed idyllic. Swings on the deck, toys in the yard, and weekend adventures to the lake gave off the impression of a happy, healthy family life. And for a while, that was true. But in early 2022, everything started to change. That's when Shannon Lee Elliott entered the picture. At 24 years old, Shannon seemed ordinary, a quiet woman from nearby Springfield with a job at a small manufacturing company. There was no history of criminal behavior, no glaring red flags. She began dating Austin, and before long, she moved into the house with Turner and Maverick. From the outside, it seemed like a typical family blending. But what no one realized was that Shannon's arrival marked the beginning of a slow and calculated descent into horror. At first, Turner treated Shannon with the same warmth he offered everyone. He was polite, trusting, raised to show kindness to adults, but Shannon didn't return that kindness. Of all the children in the home, she seemed to fixate on Turner. Something about him, his closeness with his father, his innocent affection, seemed to unnerve or even infuriate her. She singled him out, and slowly, that innocent bond of trust began to shatter. Austin noticed that his son had changed. Turner became quieter. He didn't laugh as much. He stopped running to his dad with stories and hugs. When bruises began appearing on his small body, Shannon always had an explanation. He fell off the swing, he tripped while playing, the dog jumped on him, and Austin, whether out of willful ignorance or quiet denial, chose to believe her. Shannon began taking Turner with her to work. She told Austin it was to keep him safe, to avoid leaving him home alone. At a glance, it may have seemed like a responsible move, but in truth, it was the beginning of total isolation. At her workplace, where security cameras went unwatched, Turner had no one. No Maverick, no dad, no escape. Behind closed doors, the cheerful family life on Poplar Ridge Road was unraveling. The love and protection Turner once counted on began slipping away, and yet no one, not even his father, saw the danger for what it truly was. May the 6th in 2023 was the day Turner's life changed forever. That morning, Shannon Elliott began taking Turner to her workplace, a seemingly mundane decision that would, in reality, trap the boy in a space where no one would hear him cry, where no one would protect him. It was here, under the cold gaze of forgotten security cameras, that Shannon launched a campaign of relentless, methodical abuse. The very first day, those cameras captured a harrowing moment. Shannon struck Turner. The 5-year-old flinched, but not from surprise. He had already grown used to pain. What terrified him now was that there was nowhere left to run. At home, he could seek refuge with Maverick or his father. But at work, in an empty room, he was completely alone, at the mercy of someone who seemed determined to break him. What followed was 79 days of unimaginable torment. Every day, Turner was subjected to violent beatings. Shannon punched him in the face, kicked him across rooms, and threw him against walls. His small body, just 40 pounds, was no match for the force of an adult's rage. He tried to protect himself, covering his face with his hands, but it was futile. Each blow left bruises, cuts, and scars, physical wounds that marked only a fraction of his suffering. The worst was the suffocation. When Turner cried, and how could a child not cry, Shannon would grip his throat or cover his nose and mouth, denying him air. She watched as panic filled his eyes, as his tiny hands clawed at hers, struggling to breathe. She didn't stop until his resistance faded into silence. And then came the bite marks. The autopsy would later reveal that Shannon bit Turner repeatedly. These weren't acts of momentary anger. They were deliberate, sadistic. She bit his neck, his arms, his back, leaving behind deep wounds and jagged scars, signs of cruelty that defied explanation. It was as if she saw him not as a child, but as prey. As the violence escalated, so did the psychological torture. Shannon starved him, using food as a weapon. Turner, whose body desperately needed nourishment to heal and grow, was forced to endure constant hunger. He went to bed with a cramping stomach, woke up weak and dizzy. Slowly the energy drained from his small frame. His wounds stopped healing. His spirit faded. He stopped playing. He stopped smiling. He learned to be silent, to be invisible, to make himself as small and unnoticeable as possible in hopes of avoiding her wrath. But nothing helped. Even his stillness angered her. By July 18th, his 5th birthday, Shannon took extra care to hide the bruises. She knew Turner was going to visit his mother, Sierra, and she didn't want the truth exposed. That day, Turner smiled. He played. For a few fleeting hours, he was a child again. Sierra had no idea that her son was already mentally shutting down, that she was witnessing the final moments of his joy. When he returned to Shannon, something changed. She no longer held back. With her secret still protected, she unleashed her full rage. Over the next few days, the beatings intensified. She struck him so hard his internal organs began to fail. She watched him grow weaker, watched the light disappear from his eyes. On July 23, 2023, Turner Wayne Simpkins took his final breath. He was just 5 years, 1 month, and 5 days old. His body was found on the side deck of his home, already cold. He was dressed in long sleeves and pants, as if to hide the truth, even in death. Bruises covered nearly every inch of him. Bite marks, cuts, torn skin. All spoke of the torment he had endured. His core body temperature had dropped to 86 degrees. Shannon told first responders he had fallen out of a moving car, but the injuries didn't match the story. The cup in his car seat still held liquid. The seat itself was undisturbed. The truth could no longer be hidden. And yet, as horrifying as Shannon's violence was, there remained an even deeper betrayal, one that would soon come to light. When paramedics arrived at the house on Poplar Ridge Road that summer day in 2023, they were met with a scene that would haunt them for years. Turner's lifeless body lay on the side deck, covered in bruises, bite marks, and open wounds. Shannon Elliott's story, claiming the boy had fallen out of a moving vehicle, crumbled under even the most basic scrutiny. The car seat had no damage. A drink cup sat untouched. And most damning of all, Turner's injuries, human bite marks, internal bleeding, signs of prolonged malnutrition, told a story of slow, deliberate destruction. It wasn't long before the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation stepped in. As detectives dug deeper, they discovered something Shannon never realized: a forgotten security camera system inside her workplace. The cameras hadn't been monitored in months, maybe years. Even the company's own staff had forgotten about them, but they were still functioning, and they had recorded everything. 79 days of footage, 79 days of hell. Painstakingly, investigators combed through the archived video. What they found was irrefutable. Frame after frame showed Shannon hitting, kicking, throwing, and choking Turner. In at least 40 of those days, there was clear, documented physical abuse, some of it happening just feet away from oblivious co-workers. The footage became the beating heart of the prosecution's case. Silent, damning, undeniable. On March 4, 2024, a grand jury in Cheatham County indicted Shannon Elliott on 2 counts of first-degree murder and 3 counts of aggravated child abuse. She was arrested that evening and held without bond. Court officials set bail at $1 million, but no one ever paid it. When her case went before the court on July 30, 2024, Shannon declined to contest the charges. And as prosecutors began reading the 20-minute summary of Turner's final weeks, the courtroom fell into a suffocating silence. Seasoned attorneys struggled to hold back tears. Even Judge David Wolf, a man who had seen death penalty cases and life sentences, was shaken. "I've sent people to prison for life and beyond, but I have never heard a more horrific statement of facts in my career," he said, voice trembling. Shannon was sentenced to life in prison with a possibility of parole after 51 years. For most, it was as close to justice as they could hope for. But the story wasn't over. On January 6, 2025, a second arrest stunned the community. Austin Gordon Simpkins, Turner's own father, was taken into custody on charges of child neglect and abuse. The investigation had revealed that Austin had known. He had seen the bruises. He had heard the cries. He had witnessed Turner return from work each day covered in fresh injuries. But he said nothing. He did nothing. More than that, he helped hide it. He never took his son to a doctor, never called child services, never pulled him from Shannon's reach. prosecutors now viewed Austin not as a helpless bystander, but as a silent accomplice in his own child's slow death. The system had failed Turner at many levels: medical, legal, societal. But the most catastrophic failure happened inside his own home. When the details of Turner Simpkins' case were made public, shock turned swiftly to outrage. Communities across Tennessee, and soon the entire nation, struggled to comprehend how such prolonged and visible abuse could have gone unnoticed, unreported, and unpunished for so long. News stations aired Turner's smiling photos alongside the horrifying facts of his final days. The contrast was unbearable. Parents, teachers, social workers, everyone with a child in their life asked the same question: how could this happen under everyone's nose? The footage released by the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation was never shown in full to the public, but those who viewed it, journalists, attorneys, investigators, described it as soul-shattering. Advocacy groups for child safety began mobilizing almost immediately. Petitions sprang up demanding reform to state surveillance laws in schools and workplaces, calling for new training for employees who work near children. People wanted change, but more than that, they wanted accountability. How had no one at Shannon's workplace noticed what was happening just a few feet away? How had medical professionals missed the signs of trauma? And most of all, how had Turner's father, the man the boy loved more than anything, allowed the abuse to continue right in front of him? The failures were systemic and personal. Tennessee's Department of Children's Services came under intense scrutiny. Critics asked why no welfare checks had occurred, especially given the volume of visible injuries. There had been no formal complaints, no interventions, nothing. Child welfare advocates described the case as one of the most damning examples of the silent epidemic of unreported abuse in modern America. In Cheatham County, a grassroots campaign formed under the name Justice for Turner. Thousands of people signed online petitions calling for harsher penalties for child abuse and mandatory background checks for cohabitants in households with young children. Vigils were held in Turner's honor, some at the local park where he used to play, others in front of the courthouse where Shannon and Austin were tried. His short life became a rallying cry, a symbol of what could no longer be ignored. Media outlets from across the country picked up the story. True crime podcasts, evening news programs, and investigative journalists dissected every detail. But for many viewers, it wasn't just another tragic case. It was a call to action, a demand to listen more closely when children go quiet, a reminder that evil often hides behind familiarity. And yet, amid the outrage and sorrow, one thing became painfully clear. This wasn't just a failure of the system. It was a betrayal of trust by the very people meant to love him most. What do you do when the person a child trusts most becomes the one who lets them die? Turner Wayne? Simpkins was not failed by a stranger. He was failed by the very people who should have protected him: his caregiver, his father, his community. His story is not just about a crime, it's about silence, about how easy it is to look away, to believe convenient lies, to ignore bruises that don't match the story. This case is a haunting reminder that monsters don't always lurk in the shadows. Sometimes they sleep in the next room. Sometimes they smile at family dinners. And sometimes they're the ones holding the child's hand in public while hurting them in private. Turner was 5 years old. He loved superheroes. He adored his big brother. He laughed at Mickey Mouse cartoons and believed the world was good. He should have been starting kindergarten. He should have been playing soccer in the yard, blowing out candles on birthday cakes, growing up. But instead, he was reduced to silence. And that silence lasted 79 days. We tell stories like Turner's not because we want to relive the horror, but because we must never forget. Behind every statistic is a child, a name, a face, a voice that may no longer be here to speak, so we speak for them. If you suspect a child is in danger, don't wait. Don't assume someone else will act. Be the one who steps forward, because Turner's story should never be anyone else's. Rest in peace, little hero.